start recording. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This is the 2021 New York State Political Science Association Teaching and Learning Panel, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. Today we have 3 presentations, and we'll go in order of the online conference listed. So that will be Remy first, Naima, and then myself. So Remy, we'll have you take it away. And I think because there's only 3 of us, instead of waiting to the end to make comments, I figure we'll have more of an informal conversation and make comments right after the presentation so it's more fresh in everyone's mind.
Okay.
All righty. And on that note, take it away.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, everybody. And my presentation is on teaching political science as an experiential learning project and on how to develop inclusive pedagogy for engaging students in and out of the classroom. And this presentation is based on a service learning project that I got a small grant to run at BMCC, Borough of Manhattan Community College, in the fall of 2019. And I've done so many OER, which is the Open Education Resource, textbook projects at many CUNY campuses. And I'm making this presentation based on my Intro to Politics class, where the focus was on democracy and civic engagement. And it was incorporated as part of a service learning project with Community Board 1 in Manhattan. And students also had the opportunity to work with NYPIRG on voter education. And the project was to promote citizenship and engagement in political issues, activities, and events, as well as to improve students' critical thinking and informed decision-making everyday lives. I mean, their everyday life on issues that affected them the most. And for the project, we had, I based my open pedagogy on a zero cost textbook, a ZTC course, which means students were not required to purchase any textbook, and all the instructional material were provided by the instructor, which was me. So I did a lot of research and put the syllabus and the content week by week together on a PowerPoint presentation, which you're going to see. And also I developed a WordPress blog page for students. So most of the resources were always posted on the course page for students in addition to Blackboard. And this is just an overview of open educational resources and open pedagogy, which instructors are actually invited to contribute to the work, which means, we're teaching and we're learning as well as doing research at the same time with a Creative Commons license. And, I did receive, feedback from some of my colleagues in terms of how to structure the courses. But the most important was to get the open pedagogy going by the Community Board 1 manager, Mr. Reynolds. And this was to have open access for other faculty to maybe build upon. And this is the course page, which I'll share with you later. The theme for the open pedagogy class was power and authority in local, national, and international politics. And so I'm just going to go through for you to see what my syllabus looks like and course content. So the project that we had for students was different from your normal political science class where we would meet, once or twice a week in the classroom, and then the instructor will talk forever. So in this class, it was more hands-on. It was an experiential learning, course-based, class for students to be able to apply what they were learning in the classroom and also to apply to maybe activities in their community, to join community boards, to get engaged in city council meetings, to have meetings with or internships with their local representatives, to go around their communities just to get more information. So most of the assignments were actually based on students interacting with politicians or community activists or those in their communities that made an impact, besides us having lectures at Community Board 1. And then for the project, we had the we had to sit on one of the committees for Community Board 1, and we had two to choose from, which was the Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee or the Battery Park City Committee. So we were on the Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee, one because the university that I ran the project out of, BMCC, was right on the waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee. So that was the committee that we selected. And this was the reading schedule, mostly suggested also by Mr. Reynolds, who was the manager of Community Board 1. And all the information or the reading assignments were tailored to, experiential learning. And this is from week 6 to 9, and then week 10 to 15. So most times we had other guest speakers. Actually, we had NYPERG, to speak to the students on voter education. And luckily, a couple of my students did get, they received the NYPERG scholarship to work on campus and also on the NYPERG, in the NYPERG office, as voter education interns, both paid and non-paid. So some of the other activities we had in class were class debates. Students would choose the topics that they would like to see, which were hands-on topics that actually reflected what they were going through or their experiences in their various community. And they would actually also get feedback from some of their other instructors on maybe some of the topics that they could work on in this class. So for this, for some of the debates, we had topics in death penalty, we had topics on gun rights, we had topics on voting rights, and again, these were activities that really affected or topics or issues that affected most of the students, especially given that most of them came from, underrepresented communities with a lot of challenges such as high rate of incarceration or gun violence and so on and so forth. And this is a class lecture with Mr. Reynolds. On 2 or 3 occasions, he came to our class to make presentations. And also, once a month, we visited the community board where we had classes. And also, the community board chair was present at one of the presentations. And if you know of New York City, especially the issues on rezoning and land use, Community Board 1 is highly noted for working on such issues, and this was one of the main focus of Mr. Reynolds' presentation or theme for our class. And like I mentioned earlier, some of the students did receive a NYPERG scholarship to work as voter educator on campus, getting signatures. And another event that we had for the class was on Human Rights Day, International Human Rights Day. Students were able to visit the UN and hear from um, professionals in the field and also to network. And as a matter of fact, I believe some of the students were able to participate in the upcoming Model UN activities. So this event here was sponsored by the International Human Rights Commission. And here again at the UN for students to have more experiential learning, learning outside of the classroom. We also had a model UN, in-class model UN presentation on SDGs with Dr. Amina Ali from UN Women, who was the guest speaker. And for the final exam project, Mr. Reynolds was very instrumental in, um, developing that for us. And it was mostly on, to conduct a political analysis of two major issues on land use in New York City. And the other was also on whether Rikers Island should close or not. So what I want to do is to quickly show you. How am I doing on time, please?
You're doing well. You got a few minutes left.
Okay, so let's see here. I want to share my project page. Can you see it, or I have to
You'll need to
share it again?
yeah. You'll have to share again and go to the page and click on it.
Okay.
There you go. This looks like
Okay, so for the project, I created a WordPress page, which other faculty, are invited to create, to be part of the open pedagogy or open education resource project, where they could add resources or take from what is built on here already, and use them in their courses. And for the class, even though the service learning project was for my intro to politics class, previously I did create a lot of open education resources for my American government class, where we had student projects and heavily based on civic engagement and how young people can participate in the political process. And for that class, students were encouraged, to participate in helping their, representatives in their community work on, voter registration and signatures, collecting signatures, and raising, awareness by educating others. And here's the section for my intro to politics class. So most of the weekly discussion, all the assignments were built on this page, and at any time, students could come there, post any resources, but of course, cross-check with me. Other instructors could also post additional materials. So, overall, the purpose of this project was to um, show a different way in which we can enhance student learning, besides experiential learning, to make teaching better for instructors, and also to make learning, the purchasing of textbooks, more easy and accessible for students who otherwise may not be able to purchase like $100 textbook. And so these were some of my student presentation. Of course, they have the Creative Commons license on each of their work, so that if anyone cites the resources, they'll be able to at least give credit to the students. And of course, this was asked with permission, as with many of my other classes. So I have a resource page also, where I've built a lot of information. And my partner, Mr. Reynolds from the Community Board One, he was also instrumental in getting some resources across. So the resource page on here starts from the local government to national government to international, and then also looking at the UN. So pretty much, I'm still working on this website. I'm still adding on, and I'm still, inviting my colleagues to add on or to be able to suggest resources that I may be able to put on there for both American government and intro to politics class. So I think that's my presentation, and I thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to hear of any questions.
Okay, very cool. I'm always into the OER and open resources conversation. So my first kind of comment and kind of takeaway from a lot of this is a lot of high impact practices being done in this class with community engagement and OER and things of that nature. Is the goal then, when you're building all these resources through this website, to be able to make these courses fully downloadable and open for future faculty adjuncts at other universities?
Yes. So I can show you again. You can download any of the resources. Like if I go on the resource page, the link is available on the, if I share this link with you, you can actually go on there. The website is public, I believe, even though it's on the CUNY Academic Commons website. But you can click on any of the links, to get to any of the pages that have been put on there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the future of a lot of these intro core classes is a lot of these very large sections and Creative Commons based creative courses. So I think you're on something. I think it's a good start. Um, Naima can pop in whenever, but I do have one question. Now that
Yeah.
you've instructed these courses and you've done it a couple times, what do you think worked well, and what do you think needs improvement?
I think what would work well, even though we have the freedom of academic teaching at CUNY, would be I did receive a lot of support from the OER, library services, but we were left to create the courses as we deemed fit. So, I mean, there was follow up. We had follow up from the university, but of course, the respect is usually given to professors to develop their own content, because the last thing you would like to you would want to do is to challenge the intellectual of the intellectual property of a professor. So usually, you would be given the administrative support, but your scholarship, the development of your scholarship, would be what you worked on your own. I did have initially another instructor. As a matter of fact, the reason I got into the OER, you know, OER summer project was through my other colleague. So we were both adjuncts, and she was the one who actually informed me of the scholarship. I did receive the email, but I didn't think that just coming to BMCC or starting to teach at CUNY my first summer, that I would qualify for a grant. And we decided to write the project together because we both taught American government, and eventually we went to the library services, that ran the OER, the person at the library who ran the OER workshop, saying that, we both have different styles of teaching the same, different styles of researching, different styles of collecting information. And even if we developed a resource together, it wouldn't speak for who my colleague is. So in my courses, I like to throw in a couple of, so this is from Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but, some are more equal than others. My colleague, of course, may not like such materials or using cartoons or something like that. But in my classes, I like to familiarize the content on the level that students will actually be able to understand. Also, when we had the different debates, I wanted it to be something that spoke from the students' lives, so that they're not just debating or discussing issues that they were reading from a textbook that did not, was not applicable to their current life.
Very cool.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So this is really amazing and it's so inspiring. Thank you. I wanted to kind of ask you to tell us a little bit more about how it was. What happened when you were doing it? How were the students responding? How did you get them to go? How did you get them to be excited? Just like I want to hear more about what happened and what strikes you about how all of this, just like unfolded.
I agree. I think that's a great question.
Yes, I think that's actually a great question. So it was twofold. The first part of the class, in terms of getting students to go or motivated, was that they were so excited that they would be doing an activity outside of the classroom. So that was the first thing, that they didn't want to sit in the classroom 24/7, and they wanted something exciting, so unique, that wow, we're going to have classes at, Community Board 1, and that is located on One Center Street, which is the administrative seat of every agency or so, or almost every agency in New York City. And it was like right across the street from City Hall, and students will be able to interact with community leaders or other administrators, or other agencies, because most of these students, they needed opportunities like internships or summer jobs, summer employment, and just to be able to do something different and not sitting in the classroom. So that was the first excitement, that really got students excited. Unfortunately, some of my other students had classes back to back. So you usually would, they would be given about 10 minutes break before, in between classes. So if we had a meeting at Community Board 1, it was an exact 10 minutes from the campus, and it wouldn't be too convenient for some other students. So initially, I sort of made it obligatory for every student to be able to participate. But then when I saw that, some would be coming from a class and they will be getting there late, which I said, was okay, and some would not make it on time to their next class. So I made it optional. And if you were able to attend on those days, fine. But you can supplement not being able to attend the briefings at the community board by attending community board meetings, whether at One Center Street, where we had the waterfront and park projects with, or at their own local community boards. So they were encouraged to actually do something in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods. And then I had a form. I don't have the form handy here. So on the form where, sections where, if you attended any event outside of class or participated in any activity, it could even be your local PTA meeting or something like that. And, you would write the name of the meeting, the date, and whoever organized it would need to sign it. So that way it showed that students were actively engaged in activities. And also, voting, they were encouraged to vote if they had registered or if they reached the age to be able to, vote. So one assignment was to give extra credit for students to actually go vote, and then they would take a picture outside of the polling site, and they could take the form also to the maybe coordinator at the election site to sign for them that they actually were there to vote. So it was pretty much hands-on, but I did put into consideration students who were not able to participate in some of these activities. They were, alternate assignments that they worked on.
I think that's really cool. Thank you. I really
You're
think it's awesome.
welcome.
It's a neat project. All right, so then let's shift over. Naima, I'm going to have you take over.
All
And we'll
right, let's see how I can do this. I've never shared anything on. Oh, that's.
there you go. Now
Oh
you
no, That's a different document. No,
Uh,
what do you see in front of you?
a portable simulation and/or.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna try to. Okay. All right. So in terms of pedagogy, I kind of like to do two big things. I do some work on design thinking, but really my big investment is on simulations and role playing and games. And part of the work that I do is with the Reaction to the Past Consortium, which is a kind of set of elaborate games, etc., which is actually based on historical situations. But part of the work that I do is also based on kind of these imaginary situations, right? So this is the first game I've designed. I've been implementing it for, I want to say, 6 years now, on and off. So I've played it a number of times. I've played it in classes as big as with 30 students. I've played it with classes as small as 12 students. So the reason why I really love this game is because it's portable in a number of ways. You can make it work with as many students as you want. You can make it work across multiple classes. In IR, in comparative politics. I've taught this in Intro to Global Studies. I've taught this in civil wars. I've taught this in armed conflict. So, so you can really go up and down levels in terms of what concepts you want to teach, and you can really kind of make this game your own, right? So this paper is really kind of about the game itself, how to run it, what the possibilities are. So the whole, there is a lot of evidence that conflict-related simulations can help students understand conflict processes, right? Why things go the way they do, how negotiations happen. It can help students understand particular outcomes, right? Because sometimes they look at things and they're like, why do people make these decisions? Why do they continue to fight when everybody should want peace? Why was this outcome so ridiculous, right? And being in the simulation, I've realized, playing simulations can help students understand that negotiations are complicated, right? And it just takes 1 second for an outcome to go in a certain direction. Simulations can also help decenter dominant Western narratives because students are actually taking on roles which are not the Western, kind of like invader or the Western power or the so they're actually imagining what it feels like being in a certain position, right? But eventually it also helps them explore why people do what they do, right? How identities matter, how human, what motivates human action. So on an individual level, it really kind of helps them understand what it's like making decisions in the situation. So to this end, my game has 4 major objectives, learning objectives. One is to enhance students' understanding of concepts, right? So as I'll explain later, the concepts can be as very kind of basic as democracy and the state and etc., or it can be as detailed as going into kind of election systems and all of that, right? So it's really it's class specific, but it really helps students understand the concepts because they're implementing them, right? They're living them, as opposed to concepts being some abstract ideal type in their head. It enhances collaboration and formulating and executing complex goals. And sometimes the goals are mutual, sometimes the goals are competing. So it fosters both kind of competing negotiation as well as collaboration. It positions students to challenge dominant Western narratives because when they get to play certain people, they realize, right, certain things don't hold. And it also allows them to explore the complex nature of political identities, right? How their identities and who they are in the game can influence decisions. So, for example, I had a student this semester who didn't like his role and said, let me play an army official because I'm in the army. And I'm like, no. The reason why you should not play an army official is because you're in the army, right? He wasn't happy, but I'm looking forward to checking in with him to see how that went for him. So, the backdrop of the game, right? And the game is called Andor. The country is Andor. It's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, post-colonial country in Central Asia. So it has all the problems in the world. The government is losing legitimacy because of corruption, ineffectiveness. There's a lot of opposition. The government's clamping down. There is an elite force. There is the army. There is border forces. All of the bad guys are there, right? Impending state failure. You have in certain areas, you have warlords and local leaders who are governing because the state has gone. The state really doesn't exist. So you have the state failure element. And then, so government collapse is imminent and a new era is in the horizon. And students, and actors are really essentially excited about what the new Andor is going to be like because the old Andor is kind of like gone, right? So, I basically have 3 ethno-linguistic groups. I have a Christian ethnic group that's about 60% of the population. They are the majority in the government. I have a minority that's Muslim, but also an ethnic minority. So just a caveat, I've played this game by mixing so students have drawn 3 straws, which is religion, ethnicity, and occupation. And I found that gets really complicated, even if it's really fun. But this semester I'm doing it with 2. So ethnic and religious identities are similar for them, right? And you have some minorities, in addition to the Muslim minority, that are just really kind of scattered and just really, really small in number. So I also give them a district map with the population, so they know in each district of the country, what the population is, what the percentage is. So certain areas are majority concentrated, certain areas are Muslim concentrated, right? So this helps them make certain decisions about territoriality. But I also give them a map, and I need to make this like prettier, right? This is kind of a really roughly hand-drawn map, but it shows them where the borders are. It shows them where the different territorial, how the different territorial divisions play out, where the rivers are, where the oil fields are. So it really helps them in the final stages of the game where they have to kind of figure out what the country is going to look like post-conflict. Gameplay. The game has 4 to 5 sessions depending on how you want to play it. In terms of setup, the students are handed out details of things happening in this country, right? So whatever I gave you, the backdrop I gave you in the slide, it's really kind of 3 pages of just details of all of the stuff going on. The students are handed out their identities. They kind of draw 2 hats. They have their ethnic identity, which is majority or minority, and they have an occupation, right? So the occupation is mostly farmers, but you also have you know, professors and students and all kinds of different identities that are kind of reflective of the population. As I wrote before, in a larger class, I've done ethnicity and religion separately, and then the occupation, and that also has really interesting outcomes. So that's the setup, right? And essentially, in session 1, the first thing they do is to form coalitions, right? So they have to decide who their friends are and who their enemies are. Before session 1, the prep is the students have to write elaborate character profiles for themselves. So that's their homework. And in a way, that becomes their rule sheet, right? Who they are, what their motivations are. So I ask them to think about who your character is. I mean, they already have an occupation and they already have an ethnicity and religion, right? But they have to morph this into a real person. So, you know, give them a name. What are their grievances? What are their priorities? So they come to class ready with that. And then I ask them to form coalitions, right? Who do you want to work with? And interestingly, the same coalitions always develop. So, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute, but and sometimes certain coalitions develop, but before the next session, I'll let them switch. So I'll kind of play devil's advocate, and I'll put students together in a space and be like, hey, are you sure you want to be in that coalition? So it works out. Now, because my class was online last semester, it was really hard for them to form coalitions when we were all on Zoom or all on Teams. So this semester, I gave them coalitions, which are similar to coalitions that are already formed, but I don't think it was as fun. It's much more fun when they do it themselves. But what happens is I usually get three groups, right? I get the majority, which is they're the Christian majority, but they're also farmers, so their interests tend to be mostly economic, right? I have the minority Muslims that have their own coalition almost always, right? Almost always, who are really concerned about representation. And then I have the third, which is the former state officials, right? The army and the government, and they're basically the ones who are defecting and saying, hey, you know, we're going to be the good guys now, and we're going to do things right. So it's interesting that that's what develops. Sometimes I have, in a bigger class, I've had, you know, Marxists and, you know, all kinds of fun things, but usually in a smaller class, that's what happens. So session 2, once they've formed their coalitions, I ask them to create a party manifesto, because right now we're moving towards a new country and election, right? So now they sit there and talk about what their coalition members have in common, how are you different from each other, what are your assets, weaknesses, why are you in this coalition, what are your priorities. So this is the kind of worksheet that they fill out, right? And once they fill this out, they actually have to go and create a party manifesto. And they give them samples of manifestos, and they end up writing really, really cool things, right? Okay, so now we're all set. Now we think this is going to be a brilliant future for this country. And this is when, of course, things start to go wrong, right? So you have this event. There's a massacre of students. So basically, I go and kill off a bunch of Muslim minority students. The governments are saying these are terrorists from across the border because this happened at the border. The Myronians are blaming the government. And what happens is at this moment, this is when the minority, the Myronians, who are actually, you know, you have a very active group of Myronians who are calling for succession, right? So they're saying that we want to be an independent country. So basically, they have to write a press release, right? Each group has to be like, here is our position on this, right? So I asked them to think about whether the successionists have the people's support. The successionists are successful, but why? What are their grievances? Should the government negotiate with them? You know, so they're talking about all these things, and we're starting to now talk about autonomy, right? Which is the big question that's usually comes up for me in this game, right? So what should autonomy look like? You know, are we going to give them that? What happens when we give them the area that has a geographical majority, right? So all those things I have to talk about. How will resources be divided? How will borders be drawn? So they're thinking about all these things. And, you know, I can tell you later about how different sessions have gone. But at this point, the Myronians start siding with their extreme leadership and saying we want to succeed, right? But the others don't want them to succeed because it's because they live where the oil fields are. So there's all these complicated things happening. But now that they've made a statement and made their position clear, we now move toward the final stage of the game, which is the constitutional assembly, right? The students write a constitution and vote on a constitution for the new Endor. So the biggest thing that takes up the most time is succession autonomy. So each group writes its own constitution. I give them the different points they want to think about. And this is where it's portable, right? Because depending on what class you teach, you can have them think about things as little or as much as possible. In Intro to Global Studies, we have done things very simply. In conflict resolution, in my armed conflict class, we're actually reading about succession. We're reading about, conflict management, right? So we're talking about federalist state. We're talking about, century federalism, all of these different forms. So we go much more in depth. So the first thing to vote on is succession and autonomy, right? Like, are the Myronians going to be a different state? Are they going to have autonomy, or are they just going to be any other state? We talk about electoral system. A little bit, not as much. But next semester I'm teaching Intro to Comparative, so I want to do this more. We talk about representation in government institutions. How do we kind of balance this out? How do we make sure each group is represented? We talk about economic recovery, development, education system, and language is always a really important one because Myronians speak a different tongue, right? And especially when we're studying in conflict-related classes, so many movements in post-colonial countries started because of language. So they present their ideas, they negotiate each point, and then we have a final vote. So as opposed to standard games like reacting, the thing is in this one, the students have a lot of leeway. It's very open. So it can get messy and you have to be prepared for messy. But it's actually really fun because things almost always fall into place, right? For example, every time I run this game, no one has ever voted, like Endor has never given independence to the Myronians. That has not happened. Whenever the Myronians want independence, people always brought them back, right? Like so they managed to do that. I can tell you about some of the challenges I've had, but I'm going to save that till later. But this is what the game looks like, right? And we close with a vote. So in terms of conclusion, I really like this game because it's so portable. I've done this in so many classes. I do think the way it's designed works best in a higher level, like a 200 or 300 level conflict-related class. It would work just as well in Intro to Comparative. Intro to IR, not so much because I don't, because these are mostly kind of like comparative concepts, but it does work really well in Intro to Global Studies also and other I can't find the word, interdisciplinary courses. I forgot that word. And the second thing is there is a DEI component to this because I do think this fosters inclusion in very, very interesting ways. So my next paper on this, I'm actually going to collect some data from the students this semester, hopefully. And I just got notified the paper got to SoTL. So my next paper is going to be student responses and talking about how this fosters inclusion in the classroom. Okay, that's about it, I think. I hope I'm at the time limit.
It's great. No, this is really fun. This is pretty cool. I like simulation papers, and so you talked about SoTL. So is the goal to send this to the Political Science Journal of Education eventually? I'm guessing.
So this one I am actually I'm writing up for that, and a colleague told me to do that. So just the game itself, I'm going to write up.
Yeah.
Just for the teaching section.
Yeah.
And this kind of forced me to finish it. So that I'm going to submit now. But I'm also working on IRB to really quickly gather some data on inclusion, so I can do the next paper, which is going to be on the game and inclusion specifically, because I don't think there's very little work, if any, in political science about inclusion, about DEI and simulations, and there's a huge gap, I think.
Yeah, huge. I was actually going to bring that up. Like you have something there. Like you got a couple different ways you can go with like versions of this paper. Like a smaller version, you could send it to like a journal like the Online Journal of Distance Learning Administration, like specifically how this simulation works online, and how it doesn't work. See the stuff. I just think it's fascinating. There are many ways to go, but so I will toss you your first question, kind of like what you asked Remy. So overall, how do the students take it? Like, I mean, if I was in the class as an Americanist, I usually like my comparative and IR classes. I was just had to get through them. I would be really excited to do this because it'd be fun. So tell me what like your students think.
So at Manhattanville, I have done this in smaller classes just because my conflict class has been pretty small. This is the first time I'm doing it in intro class, and it's been good and bad, but I'll save that for later. So in Geneseo, when I ran it for the first time, it was really fun. It was 30 students. It was so they were all political science majors.
Yeah.
And so we had these coalitions, and I'm like, okay, we know what we're doing. I come back to class on Monday, and all the coalitions had changed. And I had no idea what was happening. Apparently, some of them had run into each other at a party over the weekend, and over beers that had decided that they were going to form a new coalition.
Right, because
and this is what you want.
Like,
huh?
There's nothing else to do in Geneseo but go to like a house party. Like,
well, yeah, and talk about what happened in class, apparently,
yeah.
Right? So I was really excited about that. I'm like, oh, you're talking about this outside of class. How fun. At Manhattanville, it was a little difficult because the first couple times I did it, the class was really small. So it was much more intellectually oriented than action oriented. Students were thinking a lot. In terms of outlets, this other thing I want to discuss. The first time I ran this game at Manhattanville, we have an online e-portfolio system called Education. I used Education, and it would look like a website, right? So it was much prettier, and students were commenting and doing all of that. This time, to keep it simple, I used Blackboard blogs. I don't like it as much. I think it works much. So when the students are posting their constitution as a page, like something that looks like a website, and others are, it's much more interactive, right? And they're already talking before they come to class to vote. So, so that was one thing. The outlet is important, I think. How do students respond? My classes are like so the armed conflict class is a little self-selective because it's 2000 level. It's students who know me. It's students who are already interested in this stuff. So it was different, right? They were thinking a lot. It was different. But in intro class is a whole different dynamic because they don't all know each other well. Mm-hmm. They don't know me well, right? So it's both building relationships, but also creating tensions because I think students, you have to make it very clear, right? If somebody's a jerk, it's because it's in their role to be a jerk.
Right.
And I almost want to be like, you guys need to hug it out when you go out of class, right?
Nice.
So, so this is less of an issue in this game than it is in a reacting game, for example, where you have hardcore extremists. I don't really have that because I'm like, nobody needs to play a terrorist, this is not needed. It's fun. It's fun. But the online experience has been bad because when you put students in groups, some people just don't do the work.
Right. And that's the hard part with this whole online experience. And that's just, it's hard to do simulations online. Like we had a problem with that with like one of our MPA classes, like a bargaining class or the labor bargaining. It worked great in person and online. It just never happened. Like, so I get it. So
what did you do?
So it's, I will talk for my colleagues. So what they did is they actually had to meet socially distanced on campus in our conference room and try to work it out. And really what happened was because the labor team was so far behind the business that like with the leader of the business team kind of came in and just crushed the labor revolt. It was kind of like Amazon. Like they just kind of came in and said like, no, you're lucky we're paying you this wage. And they were supposed to, and being an MPA class, they were supposed to bring up like, how to work through the government to change these laws. And really the other side worked through the government to make it a right to work state. So they got rid of labor unions in the entire state. That's I'm like my poor colleague who was like this labor rights, just like extreme left, like heart, but just broke his heart.
It's kind of, this is what happens in the real world.
I thought it was excellent. As the chair, I was like, this is fantastic. He was like, it's killing me. It's killing me on the inside.
So one thing, that I always see is the coalition that's the army officials and the government representatives are always like, we're going to be in power, you know, we're going to be dictators. And I'm just like, you might not want to tell them that. You might want to say that in a corridor, but you do not want to be in front of the minority and be like, say yes so we can rule over you, right? So
Always how it happens. I do like these in like my leadership class, and it's always like the army generals are the ones like these are kids who could be like far left of views in the class. They become like an army general, like it's this is a dictatorship, it's mine. I'm like, whoa.
oh my god, yeah. So the kid I'm talking about grew up in a really left Marxist family in Latin America. You know, his parents are like professors and hardcore Marxists, and here he is being like, I want to be a dictator. Okay.
Everything your family's fought against for all these years.
Exactly. I know he said that, right? My parents are going to be so disappointed in me right now.
But that power, and that's how it happens, and it's so fun, and that's what's so great about simulations because you can, like you said, this one too is transportable. I'm thinking about my leadership class. I'm like, how wonderful this would actually be in a leadership class perspective. It's a completely different idea, but you have the leaders kind of like how they're interacting and how people take different roles, and I love it.
And I give you a very detailed version because I'm so used to playing this in armed conflict, but in the paper, I'm trying to kind of tease out, like, here's what you can do, but here's how you make this part yours, right? So it's 5 sessions, and each session can be 20 to 30 minutes. So you can actually do this in 2 classes. You can even kick out certain sessions. You don't have to do all the sessions, right? Number one. And the second thing is, it can be as little as you want or as much as you want, right? You could just do the coalitions part and end there, for example.
I'm thinking about just think about if you get somebody like 3 faculty members from different universities, all same similar size classes, and each takes one role, and you play virtually that way. Universities, as the minority, as the groups, that could be interesting too.
Yeah,
it's really transportable. It's awesome. I think I absolutely will love it. It'll go over well, and I think it'll go well for that journal. And I think it's just neat, and you should be really proud of it. It's really fun.
Thank you. You know, I am really proud of it. I'm actually writing a reacting game right now, which is like the real kind of like live version of this. So this one is inspired by the work I did on post-conflict Iraq in 2005. I was a researcher for that project, so it's kind of, you know, but then I'm going to do the real Iraq game for reacting, which is going to be different, right? Because it's going to have actual scenarios.
These kind of simulations, and it's kind of OER, REM stuff. This is really the future of how it's relating, and these are skill-based learning. Like you're tricking students into reading because things are free, and you're tricking students into talking about autonomy and sovereignty and constitutions, and it's fantastic. And that's the buy-in.
Thank you. So I have a question, right, for both of you. So when I do this in my armed conflict class, we read a book on conflict resolution. So it's very much about, federalism and dividing of the state and what works and cases like Sierra Leone, et cetera, right? But I wanna think about what readings to give students for an intro to global studies, intro to comparative. I even want to be bold and do it in intro to IR when I teach it. You know, what do they read in addition to because that, there we're using very basic concepts, right? Like democracy and electoral systems, et cetera. So they have a textbook, but can I give them something else that's exciting for them to read?
Good question.
I think it depends on your interest, because for my, service learning project and for the open education resource for my American government class, I looked beyond what other instructors may have prescribed for students to be reading. So I went based on my own interest, based on my own activities, and just pulled resources from other colleagues I met outside of academia, and pulled resources from maybe different organizations and different places, different people. And most times I would invite guest speakers to share their work. So that was another way of building resources for what students were going to be reading in the classroom.
That's a great idea.
A great idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, I want to look at. It's a great idea, Remy. I didn't think of that because I want to look at. I want to look at what people in the UN are writing. I want to look at people who are actually there when these new constitutions are made, right? USIP, the State Department.
Simulation great IR. So in IR it's weird, but they always tend to work great in IR. This one could, but I mean IR theory maybe I have a political theory background, so I go right to some of just kind of the classic theory arguments on conflict. On an intro to IR though, as an Americanist, I'm like, oh, IR is just the study of war, like, which is.
Well, I mean, yeah, but this is I'm a comparativist. I'm
Right.
thinking from a and the reason why I made this game is because I felt like all the games I know about conflict are IR games, and I'm so tired of this, right?
That's exactly why that's right. Oh man, it's such a good comparative game. It's just a good game.
Well, I mean, Josh, if you think of like theory readings or theorists,
Yeah.
yes, I would love that.
Okay. Instead of taking a better time, I'll think about it. Not like we won't talk to each other again soon. I will. I'll get you some. Yeah, I'll get you an email and think about some things because like I'm gonna steal this idea. I'm thinking about intra-American government. Like I'm thinking
Yes,
we could like.
play my game. I
Yeah,
would love that.
I mean, we might be playing this game like university at some point. So like you don't worry. So all right, we got a
Yes,
few
I
minutes.
have a quick question before you get to your presentation.
It's not
I
nearly.
wanted to find out if what courses do you use this game in, and do you revise the game, or is standard for all courses?
So for me, this is I designed this game so that I could transport it, right? I wanted to. I mean, that was my experiment because I played this in conflict classes only, right? I have a comparative conflict class called Armed Conflict. That's where I played it. And the same class in Geneseo I taught, I played it those 3 times. But now I'm doing it in Intro to Global Studies, which is not even political science, right? It's interdisciplinary. So I think for me, the issues have changed depending on. So the first 3 stages are the same because it's very similar. But when you get to the Constitution, those are the issues that change because depending on what class you're teaching it in, right? So I have the map and I have all of that, so they can start thinking about territoriality. But we don't. But an intro class doesn't think about electoral systems, right? In intro class, they basically decide autonomy, independence, or stay together, right? So I think I've designed this so that you can when you're teaching it, decide what concepts you want to use this to work.
Very cool. All right, well, that's a tough act to follow, but I'm going to try.
You're being way too kind,
I know. Well, I'm being honest. I'm just like, man, I'm like, I should have went first. Because my thought a cool idea. All right, so let me share my screen here. Oops, hit the wrong button. All right, so you should be seeing. So this is a presentation on what myself and my colleagues call massively multi-section online polls course. So here in Georgia, we call it political science polls, or for short, MMOPC. It's about designing and instructing American government for student success in the age of COVID. So myself and my colleague David Pena were professors of political science here at Clayton State, and Justin Mays is the Center for Instructional Development Director. So he comes with the the development side as we are the instructor side. So long story short, there's been a plethora of research over the last 20 or so years about distance education, and it's morphed within the last 15 years to a big discussion, right, on online course delivery and how well it works in lieu of a traditional classroom, being web facilitated, being 100% online, synchronous or asynchronous, the blended format of where you have most of your instruction online and then maybe come to class for a couple lectures, or mostly in the blended idea is a lot of tests being live so we can kind of watch what's happening. And then purely online, what I mentioned, which was the asynchronous sync and web facilitated, which is where you sit live in a class and you discuss, but there's transferred to many different classrooms around the university or around the system that you're in. So the literature out there said for a while there that 100% purely online delivery, the two big ones that we're seeing here, Allen and Seaman and Schechner and Newman, that it works just as well as a traditional seated class, that there's not a lot of difference. So the traditional faculty worry and fear that online classes isn't the same as a seated class. There's just not a lot of empirical evidence to suggest that. Friedman and Joyce went a little further and said the hybrid model is pretty much has the same findings. But they make the argument that the testing live keeps the class honest. And then there's been a whole a string of literature, face-to-face versus hybrid versus online. And the key finding everyone cites is Larson and Sung in 2009 that says there really is no empirical evidence that any of these delivery methods are different, that they all provide high quality courses depending on student. And that was always kind of the key thing. It's depending on student. So with this in mind, when I first got here to Clayton State my first year or two, I worked with two faculty members on redesigning our political science 1101 class. Um, Sherry Southard and Antoinette France Harris are both legal studies professors, and both taught a lot online. I was coming from an institution up in University of Pittsburgh and Bradford, Pennsylvania. I had no online classes. I'd never taught an online class before, so it was kind of an interesting kind of dynamic. And so we developed this whole class, which I'm going to show you right here, and we wrote a paper on it. So this was the original idea of Polls 1101 called iSpock, which was an interactive, self-paced online course. So I was clever and created a title of a paper called Trekking a New Course Delivery, with a Spock reference for Star Trek fans. And it's a fun class, right? You have everything's built through the first page. The D2L tells you to read the syllabus, complete the syllabus quiz, and then it has due dates, and it kind of lets you walk through, but it is really self-paced. You study as you go. And then you click a lecture, see if it's still active. This is clearly, I don't think, yep, not anymore, because we redesigned it. But you'd have a lecture quiz, and the students kind of knew exactly what everything was the whole time, and everything was there. And we were very, very proud of that course. So we wrote this paper. It was a HIP class, had high impact introductions, rich dynamic content. We had a lot of different little videos of things like Lego buildings coming together, a lot of interactive content, puzzles. I mean, you name it, we were cutting edge for 2015, or so we thought. So we were talking everywhere about how wonderful this class is. The USG, University System of Georgia, gave Sherry some money to go do a little speaking tour about the class and its success. And I got nervous as the political science professor. I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm like, I really want some more evidence before we start telling how wonderful this class is. So I said, I'm like, we really do need to do a kind of a comparison model, like paper here, study, to kind of find out what's happening. So we did an empirical comparison of the conventional online class for Polls 1101, which wasn't this self-paced course. It was just your traditional professor lectures over a PowerPoint slide, read this chapter, here's your quiz or discussion board. And then we compared it to what's called Move On When Ready here in Georgia. That's dual enrollment. So our advanced high school students face-to-face class, and compared it then to the iSpock, which was this high impact self-paced online course. And we just did some basic kind of analysis with Move On When Ready versus iSpock, which was T-tests on their exams, 1, 2, and 3 on their test scores, and found that there is no empirical difference between student performance with the dual enrollment, Move On When Ready, and iSpock. So that made you feel a little good. And then the conventional online versus iSpock, that's where we saw the big difference. Students in the iSpock class were scoring about 14 points higher on average on their test than the traditional seated class, traditional online classes. And so that was the moment where two of the professors were like, "See, this is the class that does it all. This is how we should move forward." And I go, "Man, I don't know. Like, I think we have some limitations to this study, but I'm glad that we're finding that there is something different." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, there's a limitation problem. We're talking about high achieving high school students. So these are kids who are taking college classes while still in high school. And to get into the iSpot class, you have to have a 3.0 GPA. I'm like, so we're really selecting on the dependent variable. And we're looking for results. But what we do find is we're able to publish this paper because we do find that there was something unique about this self-paced. But I really forced the idea of limitations. I'm like, this is very early. We got to keep working on it. So what I did is I decided to tank my own student evaluations for one semester. I removed the 3.0 GPA and the Move On When Ready requirement and let anyone take the iSpot course, and grades went right back to a C. They regressed to a mean of 72, and the course overall average dropped to a D with the removal of the 3.0 GPA. And I was like, this is exact. And we have 60-person seated classes. I taught 4 sections of 60-person online classes that semester to tank my evaluations to show that I was kind of right. And it was important to me because I knew there was something wrong. So the question was like, is iSpock just a little more than a well-designed correspondence course? And that's kind of seemed what we were trying to find out. It seems like it was. It was really well-designed correspondence course for students who are high achievers to begin with. So that's not what academia is for in the online environment. So I decided when I took over the political science program before I became chair of the political science coordinator, I wanted to redesign and rebrand ISPOC, and I got approval from the chair. We had to get approval from the dean because, of course, the USG system liked that we were doing this. And I just complete redesign of the course. And I knew it was a correspondence course. I went to our associate provost, and she was adamant that it was a correspondence course, and we couldn't do that because, I mean, if anybody pays attention to what's going on with like Western governors, their online courses got sued for a lot of money because they have nothing but correspondence courses. So we didn't want that. So we dropped the ISPOC name, so the idea of self-paced was gone. And we built the course with the newest, most up-to-date version of D2L. That's what we use. Our learning management system is Brightspace D2L. I don't know if that's what you do. It's just a very nice version of Blackboard or Moodle, whatever. But what we did is we really changed the idea. We personalized deadline tracking and reminders in the course, so the students can work at their own pace, but there are certain deadlines that they have to meet to be able to go on. And if they're falling behind, the system is automatically created to remind them to do this project or do this reading or do whatever that they're supposed to do to be able to move on. We built Microsoft Teams into the course on purpose. This was before COVID hit. Microsoft Teams, and no one really knew what it was. And they're like, oh, it's a video web conferencing tool, and like Skype, and like, nobody's going to do that. who would have thought? So Teams luckily was built into it. And then one of the things we did, we guaranteed weekly professional feedback and grading. So there was constant communication with the students, and that's built through what's called the Remind tool on D2L. And then, of course, because online is a little bit like you're distant from the person, we made sure the instructor content widget was right up in the front of the course so people know who their professor was, that it was a political science course. I'm guessing a lot of you get like, oh, this is just American history, or this is a history course. We all die a little bit. And so they can have this kind of interaction and content from the beginning. So here, if it's going to show up, is the new version of it, if it will show. All right. Here is our new version of the political science course, and it all looks the same for everyone. So when you log in, this is coding, so it'll tell you like, welcome whoever you are, your name, and then it has your whole welcome video and your instructor content information. We have TAs in our classes, there's teams built in, and then like a little orientation video that steps you through what the course looks like. And what's different from this right away, you can see from the other one, all the information on the course was like just a data blast down the middle. This class is now built completely through the content tab. And what's really neat about it is everything's built in so the students don't, it's kind of a no-think course. So if the students click on chapter 1, gives you your overview per chapter of what you're doing in the course, what you're reading, and these are the whole checklist for you knowing what you have to do. And the students never have to leave the course again. If they click next, your textbook is built within the course. Your reading is embedded inside the course. And we use OER materials from OpenStax. So I'm big on OER and free textbooks. So the students can break through. And the way we break it up is by subsection. So it's not just that students are reading the whole chapter. They're reading subsections of the chapter. And then they get a lecture or a video on top of what they just read to re-enhance. So we can keep going through this quickly. Like a good example, so who governs pluralism? We have a neat technique. I don't know if you all have seen things like this, like Lightboard. So what we do with Lightboard
in an American democracy
is this.
The natural idea, right, is people.
It's a live lecture for the students on.
But is that really what we think? Do we think we as citizens actually govern?
And what's neat about that is you get, wherever you pause it as a student, you go to the next. If you want to just read about what is he talking about, and we'll go through a video, read a little bit more on it, come back, it saves your spot in the video as well. So this is the whole complete high impact redesign of the course. So, oops, I went too far. So it was all about addressing the content. So we realized that the non-Move On When Ready learners were failing to buy the textbook because Move On Ready gets it for free through the state. Our textbook was $180. It was too much money. So now the whole course information is free. They have it right there through OpenStax. And we have something in Georgia. It is required for students to take a Constitution quiz on the Georgia Constitution. We use that for a no-show reporting tool because we all kind of roll our eyes at that from the legislature, but it's there. But what's really neat and different about the course is that when the students access this on a tablet or a phone, it makes it look like BuzzFeed. The class becomes like a BuzzFeed example. So they're not like, you know how students can scroll through like BuzzFeed and Facebook and things like that all day? That's what they're doing now with the class. So it doesn't look that way on their laptop, but on their phones it does. Like I said, it went all through the instruction tab, but the biggest big thing we changed was the limited use of availability. The learner only has access to materials for an assigned set amount of time, and when they complete, that's when they can move on. This addresses the faculty concern for late work or learners failing on time or the correspondence aspect. So why is it different? Number one, it's completely built on the Quality Matters like rubric. If anybody knows about online teaching, Quality Matters is kind of the gold standard on how to instruct these classes through affiliated manners. It's built completely on their rubric. So when it goes through Quality Matters certification, it'll be approved and it'll get a stamp that says universally this is a quality course. And it's built on open access materials and it's instructed by multiple faculty. So it's just not me. All the faculty in political science are in the entire class. So each student gets to see every member of the political science program based on their area of expertise. So COVID changed everything. We used to have online classes of 35 for this until we had to not have it. So now we have 60-person online political science 1101 classes. But this switch to this MMOPC has worked so well that we're never going back to the 35. The university's like, the 60 is great. And it works well because it provides a lot of feedback for the students. Students are doing well. But what it really did for us is our university now has decided to provide 3 tuition waivers every year for our MPA students to be TAs for the course for the faculty members. So it's worked so well that they're giving us money to pay students to help TA the course, which, hey. And now we have a completely dedicated coordinator for just the Polls 1101 class. The future of this is we're seeing our social 1101 and para classes. So intro to sociology and intro to law and ethics have adopted this model and have started instituting this complete massive online course. And criminal justice intro is working on it currently. And then starting in the coming fall, both our 2101 and 2401, which is intro to political science and intro to global issues, will get the same exact treatment. And the department I'm a chair of is moving to all open educational resources for all their 1,000 and 2,000 level courses in the core. And we're starting the process of replicating the paper that myself, Sherry, and Antoinette did in 2015 to find the update on the outcomes. And we haven't have it fully written yet, but here's the finding of it is that when you remove the limitations from the paper of 2015, the data is pretty fuzzy. But when we compare the results of now multiple sections of this MMOPC to the ISPOC, we see the findings that we got from ISPOC are really happening in the MMOPC. So we're really seeing a highly designed, well-delivered educational finding for the new version of ISPOC. And we're moving forward. Our department's going to completely adopt this. Students love the standardized delivery. They know what they're getting. They like that the faculty are I also have to respond to them right away. We didn't standardize the feedback though, so we do see some of our faculty members take a long time or don't give enough feedback. So we're seeing that problem. So my dean wants me to help standardize feedback content. As a chair, I'm like, oh God. Don't know how that's going to happen. I'll figure that out, down the line, or hopefully not to deal with it. So it's about time. We have over 50 sections of student feedback on the course to redo this course. And then really the next question is, do MOOCs or MMOPCs work at the state smaller level, community college level? This is the kind of the future of online teaching and these giant online classes. And if we can find a way to deliver them while still providing course content and having success in student outcome, I think we have something on our hands here. So that, my friends, is my presentation on our completely online course. Lots of work up front, but it's kind of rewarding. So I'll take any questions or comments on it.
That's so great. I think,
Yeah.
I have two kind of big comments, right? I think it's so great. You put all this work into it. It sounds like it can, like you said, it can really be something.
Yeah.
I am wondering, one of the things I noticed, right, was when you kind of go, and this is not related to the class itself, but it's related to kind of observation about students, right? Like when you decided to kind of not restrict by GPA, right? When we're saying, okay, you're no longer by the quote unquote good students and we're opening it up, right? you realize that the problem is so simple, right? It's not a question of learning, it's a question of structure, it's a question of guidance, it's a question of, so like it made me think a lot about how do you get that student, like how do you get that C student to a B, even an A, right? And it's by giving them that structure and reminding them. So I think that there is also a different paper here, or like different things, like a different lesson about that component, right?
I think that's the interesting part. I know a lot of more people are interested about like the test results and seeing that, hey, this works great. But I'm more interested in like how that remind tool gets the students to interact more and keep them engaged to help move that C student to a B or an A, or got that B to an A, or that student who was really struggling to get to a C. That's what I'm interested in. And I think you're right. The other big thing for us was just, access to the textbook. Our students are low income. $180 textbook really hurt a lot of students because they weren't buying it, so couldn't read it. So, yeah.
And the other thing was, I was going to ask you, did your student evals actually tank?
So, my the instruction, my instructor did not tank. I tend to have higher, and I'm lucky, reviews, but the content reviews and format, those went south. So we have a scale of 1 to 5, and like my instructor personals were in the high 4.8s, 4.9s, kind of like where they always were. But then I was in the 2s for like the delivery and like and that's what I knew was wrong. It was all fun and games, but no content, and that's what I knew. But I had to get approval from my chair and dean, and like my dean, I was like, when I give you my annual evaluation, this is going to be terrible. Like I'm aware of it, but
I will take one for the team.
Yeah, I'm like, I know there's something wrong here, and I gave my chair and dean credit for letting me do that and not killing me on my annual evaluation. Because here in Georgia, your annual evaluation is tied to your merit raise if you ever get one, and it's based on a score. So if that year we did get a merit raise, so I would have been in deep trouble based on that. I wouldn't have gotten any like extra money.
Yeah, no, this is so great. Congratulations.
Yes, I have 3 comments. The first is your department working on making OER for your 1,000 or 2,000 courses,
Both of them.
like the intro courses. So that's very good. But the question relating to that is that how do you do you have a standard textbook that all faculty will work on, or are they they're gonna suggest textbooks that they are familiar with, or the department has a textbook suggested to everyone? And the other comment is that, I think, your university is doing a great job to want to increase student retention, because most times we know that once students are not able to purchase a textbook, they start lacking behind in their assignments, and that means dropping classes or just, stop coming to classes. So I think it's very good that you're working with students deliberately to be able to encourage them to up their grades from one level to another.
Thank you. So actually I can address most of that, I think. So OER is so important to our university. It's part of our College of Arts and Sciences goals, and we're trying to get it into our strategic plan for the 1,000, 2,000. But it does take some work, right? Like, how do we do that? So for 1101, Polls 1101, it's a standardized textbook. Everyone uses the OpenStax textbook. Sociology went to OpenStax as well. But what we do, so Georgia, I'll give Georgia credit here. The university system has a grant for affordable learning that pays faculty to either develop free content or find the free content and adopt it. And we have an OER coordinator for our department now who has been working with the faculty to give options on books for the classes. And then the faculty member who teaches that classes, they decide which book they want to use, and they buy in that they're going to use it for 3 years. But what's nice is we get some money too. If there's like a textbook out there that just everyone uses that's not OER, we use the money to buy e-licenses for it through the library, so the students can get it free through the library. So that's another way that we're doing it to see so that the content is free. And knock on wood, by end of next year, we should have all 1,000, 2,000 level classes in the core for all 4 programs: political science, legal studies, sociology, and criminal justice should all be free. So very cool.
Do you think that's going to increase the number of students enrolled at your department if they find out that textbooks are free for all courses in your department?
It's helped our MPA program because we're going to be a Z program, which is zero cost. So all they have to do for the MPA is just pay the tuition. We already have a cheap MPA. It's like less than $10,000 for a year, but then there's no fees for textbooks, so that kind of helps that retention. But that enrollment cliff for all universities is coming. So anything we can do to help that stave off that loss, but I hope right now is retention and graduation. I'd like to see retention.
Mhm.
So, well, maybe it's a good thing that there's only three of us because we talked the whole time.
Great. Yeah.
It's actually very good that we're able to discuss and share our work, and also to provide feedback. And it's my first time to be on the pedagogy or teaching and learning you know session. So it's been very productive for me. And usually I like to offer experiential learning to my students, but I would say that being on this panel is experiential for me as well, because I've learned from both of you, especially from Naima's simulation. And I need to talk to you more on how, probably in the future, to invite you as a guest speaker or be able to use it in my courses. And to Joshua, I really like how you actually have a curriculum, in your department, and how you try to get students' grades up. So it's been very wonderful being on this panel and learning from both of you.
Same. Same. I'm so excited to see the work you're doing, Remy. I would like I'm sitting here thinking, how can I get my students to do that?
Yeah, I love
So
like
congratulations. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it, and that's why I love these SoTL panels. I think they're fantastic. You learn so much. So, well, on that note, we all have other things that we got to eventually get to, but I'm going to stop the recording. But I want to thank you both. This has been just a wonderful time, and I'm glad we could do this. And I hope to see you all, virtually live at the conference next week.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
right.
you so much.
You're
All
welcome.
the best. Bye bye.